In the quiet hum of a near-future city where drones drift like silent birds and billboards glow with promises of simple truth threads through the lives of millions, food is not just fuel. It is dignity, memory, and the shared heartbeat of communities. Starvation does not arrive in a single rush, it creeps. It begins as a shorter harvest, a delayed monsoon, a price that edges beyond a paycheck, a decision to water the rice less or stretch the lentils more. And then for too many, it becomes an empty bowl and a night that feels longer than it used to. Consider the fields where Ravi Kumar stands at dawn under a sky that once promised rain. His hands, cracked by decades of sun, remember the weight of plentiful grain. But now the soil is tired. Seasons slip, arriving early or too late. Heat pushes across the land like a heavy fist, and the well's waterline whispers the story of a vanishing past. For Ravi, the future threat is not abstract. It is the math of survival measured in buckets and seeds, a choice between buying fertilizer or paying down the loan that arrived with good intentions and hard terms. Far away in a coastal lab, Dr. Amina Hassan watches climate models bloom on her screen like complicated flowers. Isobars knot around regions already frail, showing how drought and deluge will braid themselves into the daily story of crops. Her colleagues run simulations for wheat, maize, and rice, and the graphs tell a sober tale. Yields in places least able to adapt may dip just as populations climb. Heat-stressed livestock produce less milk. Pests march north with warming air. Soil nutrients leach under erratic rain. Amina knows that a future without hunger requires 1,000 small victories won together. Seeds that sip less water, farming that gives back to the earth, storage that keeps food safe as temperatures rise. In a crowded neighborhood, Mariam Al-Hadi traces letters on a notebook her mother saved from a market kiosk. At school, lunches were the most reliable meal, a ritual of shared tables and stainless steel trays. Then a shock rippled through supply chains, conflict in one region, flood in another, price spikes radiating outward. The trucks came less often, the kitchen closed. Now Miriam's day leans on a single bowl cooked at home, and her teacher speaks softly about concentration drifting like smoke. The stomach, too, is a kind of mind. For a child, hunger is not only annoying. It is a dimming of potential, a detour from the path she had begun to trust. On the edge of a city, Carlos Mendez manages a warehouse where food once flowed like a river bananas stacked in yellow geometry, bags of rice lined like brickwork. He knows that food security is logistics, cold chains that hum without interruption, roads that survive storms, and data that predicts demand before shelves feel it. But when energy prices twitch upward and storms rip through the map, the rhythm falters. A single broken Link 1 bridge swept away. One refrigeration unit down becomes a wave that reaches the very last mile, to kitchens where meals are measured by hope as much as ingredients. Across continents, Elena Petrov walks through experimental plots where cover crops knit the soil and drip lines sparkle under sunrise. Regenerative practices, mulching, composting, rotating turn fields into living systems rather than factories of extraction. She holds in her palm a cluster of drought-tolerant grains, varieties born from careful breeding and respectful collaboration with farmers whose wisdom predates the satellites. In Elena's work, the future does not erase tradition. It listens to it. A seed is a story and a tool, and with each planting, the earth relearns how to hold water, how to host life, how to stay generous. When people speak of future starvation, they often point to climate, but the thread is braided with economics, governance, and peace. Conflict can torch fields, scatter families, and sever access just as surely as heat can wither leaves. Inequality sets the stage, scripting who eats first and who waits last. Waste, too, is a quiet culprit. Food spoiled in silos, bruised in transit, discarded at the end of a buffet's shine. Meanwhile, demand grows, cities expand, diets shift toward resource-intensive foods. In some places, biofuel policies redirect crops to engines, while in others, overfishing and warming sees thin the nets of coastal communities. A pandemic can upend labor, and a single pathogen in a staple crop can redraw the map of scarcity within a season. Yet the future is not a single path. It is many roads, and there are hands willing to build bridges. Imagine networks of local grain banks that buffer shocks. School meal programs that guarantee children like Mariam a daily anchor. Micro-insurance that helps farmers like Ravi replant after a failed monsoon. Public investments in roads and refrigeration that Carlos can trust through storms and heat waves. And research that Amina and Elena can scale beyond pilot plots to millions of hectares. Picture cities with vertical farms sipping recycled water, rooftops turned into gardens, and wastewater treatment plants that recover nutrients and cycle them back to fields. Picture policy that prices carbon fairly, safeguards soil, and steadies markets so a weather swing does not become a household crisis. There is also the story of choice at the Fork households shifting towards seasonal, resilient crops, kitchens honoring pulses, and millets that feed more people with less water. Cooks choosing less waste and more creativity. Restaurants can partner with food banks, supermarkets can adopt smarter forecasting, and communities can weave combinations of charity, commerce, and civic action that feed dignity alongside stomachs. Technology can help sensors that guide irrigation, apps that match surplus to need, traceability that deters fraud and ensures safety, but only when paired with trust, transparency, and the lived expertise of farmers and vendors who know their land and streets better than any satellite. And then there are the quiet revolutions. Women farmers gaining title to land and access to credit extension services delivered in local languages. Cooperatives negotiating fair prices, water committees that restore aquifers and youth like. Kai Tanaka coding platforms that lift smallholders into markets without toll gates of exploitation. Future starvation is a threat not because solutions are unknown, but because the world must choose to make them common, affordable, and just. It is a governance question as much as a scientific one, a cultural shift as much as an engineering challenge. If we listen for what hunger says, it does not ask for pity. It asks for partnership. It asks for cities that plan with farmers, for nations that thread safety nets through seasons, for finance that values long-term resilience over short-term yield. It asks for humility in science and courage in politics, for menus that remember the planet, and for neighbors who measure abundance not by excess, but by whether everyone at the table has a seat and a spoon. Tonight, Ravi watches clouds gather like uncertain guests. Amina's models update, flashing probabilities that can be bent by policy and practice. Mariam finishes her homework under a single bulb, and her mother looks at the rice, the oil, the spice, estimating tomorrow. Carlos listens to the whir of refrigerators and prays the grid holds. Elena kneels to press a palm into soil that feels a little cooler, a little richer, a little more alive than last year. The future is not decided. Starvation is a threat, but it is not a prophecy. If we choose wisely, if we sow care with the seeds, build justice into the supply chains, and allow hope to be practical, the harvest can be enough, and the shared heartbeat of humanity can keep its steady rhythm in kitchens, markets, and fields across the world.